Buffalo has done a really nice job again this offseason and sort of maintains that distance, I think, between them and the other teams in the division. And, it's got to be a little disheartening, I think, maybe for New England. And if I'm Miami, like, look, they're feeling good about what they did, but man, there's still a long gap. There's still a large gap, rather, between you and Buffalo, in my opinion.
Yeah, I would agree there, as well. And despite all the moves and all the trades and a new regime, and we're going to get into that with the Dolphins, like it really comes down to the quarterback in this division, and there's not one that is on the level of Josh Allen at this point. But let's start there with the Bills then. How would you grade what the Bills did this offseason, which, clearly has been impacted by the marquee signing of Von Miller?
Yeah, I give them, as I was looking at it last night, I'd say A minus. And I'd say the
Yep.
only reason I would go A minus and not higher is that Brandon Beane talked about the need for some more speed, I think, on both sides of the ball. And I think, Von Miller certainly gives them some of that, but I think there's offensively, they could use another guy that has the ability to take it the distance. And you have Diggs, you have Gabe Davis, but I think maybe whether it's someone in the slot, maybe it's another big outside receiver who can take the top off, or maybe if you can start running back, I think that's an area where wouldn't surprise me come draft time if that's what they address.
And there are going to be some receivers that have gone. Some of the top receivers will be gone by the time the Bills are on the clock here. We'll get to that here in just a little bit, but there could very well be still one of the top flight wideouts in this year's class available for them there. And look, I think you mentioned it, but Gabe Davis, I think, Emmanuel Sanders told us on GMFB last week when he was with the crew that Gabe Davis is one of those dudes that is going to become a household name. And I think he kind of asserted himself into, the conversation, inserted himself into the conversation in that divisional game loss to the Chiefs. What, he had 3 touchdowns in that game against Kansas City.
Did he have 4? I think he had 4. Did he have 4?
With 4, fine.
He might have had 4.
So I think we're going to see a lot more from him, but you're right. I think a little more speed could certainly benefit what the Bills want to do, especially after locking up Stephon Diggs to that contract extension. Let's move on then to the Patriots, right there in New England. As we mentioned, a lot of staff turnover this year, clearly with Josh McDaniels out and no clear successor as an offensive coordinator, which has obviously been one of the storylines here. So if you factor that in, to the grade here, Mike, how are we looking at the Patriots?
C minus. I don't think it's, well, for starters, you mentioned the coaching staff, right? I think unless Bill O'Brien had come to be the offensive coordinator, I think replacing Josh was going to be hard to do this season. I mean, he's been calling plays for basically 20 years. He's helped be the architect of this offense and the way it's developed over the course of 20 years. And he did a terrific job, I think, with Mac Jones. And you saw the pictures. If you're watching the games after every series, Mac goes to the bench. Josh goes there right next to him. Now, who's going to be doing that this year? Is it Joe Judge? Is it Matt Patricia? Is it Nick Caley? No one knows for sure. I do know that Bill Belichick has a large stake in Mac Jones and his future. And I believe that Bill Belichick will be more involved with Mac Jones. I think that's the feeling inside the building. But again, what does that really mean? Does that mean an extra meeting a week with him? Does that mean he's watching the offense more closely and during games and paying less attention to the big picture? Like, we haven't seen it yet, so I don't know how it's going to go. I just know that with Josh there, Bill was able to turn his back on the offense at times and talk to the defense because Josh was essentially the head coach of the offense and had, carte blanche to do what he wants. So that to me is a massive issue for this team. And then I think the other thing, Rhett, I look at is they lost some good players that they haven't replaced. J.C. Jackson is gone, right? What's the replacement plan? Terrence Mitchell? Yeah. No. Malcolm Butler? Like, okay, that's a nice dice roll, but they didn't really guarantee any money for Malcolm. So they're telling you right there, like, well, if it works, it was worth the risk. And if it doesn't, well, we didn't pay anything.
He won't make it out of camp
to do it. And then I started to go down the line too. And it's like, okay, they brought Devin McCourty back. That makes sense, right? You're going through some turnover. He's a culture guy. He's still playing at a pretty high level. You keep him. But then I thought Trent Brown was going to be gone. They got him back. They didn't pay him a ton of money. How much is he going to play? He's had a hard time staying on the field. He's missed basically half his games over the last 3 years. He's a big man. He's got lower leg issues. Like, those don't get better. He's not going to be 285 anytime soon, right? They got a weight clause in for him to stay under 365. But I think he's just at the point of his career now where if he plays double-digit games in a season, I'd be surprised, or maybe you'd be excited by that fact.
Sure.
You bring James White back again, sort of been a key guy for you, coming off a really bad hip injury, wasn't walking for the first couple months after the injury. Like, so where is he? Like he's making progress, but again, no guaranteed money. Jabril Peppers, people are trying to get excited here about. He projects as a depth piece and maybe a return guy. Like there's just, I look at the roster and I say, man, there are a lot of holes in this roster and a lot of things that need to be addressed.
And look, I think it would probably be a little foolish to expect them to spend another 300 and whatever million like they did this 2 off seasons ago now when they brought in Hunter Henry and Jonnu Smith and spent all that money with Matthew Judon and that whole crew, and would love to get a little bit more out of that tight end room, particularly with Jonnu Smith. For some of the money that was spent, certainly got a lot out of Matthew Judon. Was one of the best free agent signings of the 2021 offseason period, not just for New England. So yeah, still some unanswered questions there for the Patriots. Let's move to the Dolphins. McDaniel, the only new coach in the division this offseason, and seems dead set on rolling Tua Tagovailoa out there again and trying to support him. How much does that factor into the grade here?
Huge. So I'm giving him a B, and this could be an A if Tyreek Hill meshes with the quarterback and Teron Armstead stays on the field, because we know when he is on the field, he's one of the best left tackles in football. It also could slide to a D, because I don't know that Tyreek Hill meshes with who Tua is as a quarterback, right? And he's going from Patrick to Tua. Tua is still trying to prove himself in the landscape. Patrick is the best quarterback in the league, or one of 2 or the 3 best quarterbacks in the league, right? There's no question about that. And Armstead, like if Armstead, there's a big investment in him financially, and if he has another one of these seasons where he's playing 6 games, that's a massive issue. And look, at this point in his career, does it get better? You hope it does, because you want to see the guy on the field. We all want to see the best players on the field every week, but that's not a lock considering his past history. But to your point, like it really is. It's all about Tua, because now they've given him pieces. They've got a coach who at least publicly is saying he believes in him. Although the signing of Teddy Bridgewater at the number that they gave him makes you wonder. And look, Tua hasn't been healthy a lot either, so he's missed games. So I guess you have to have a viable backup there. But again, it just sort of it makes you think a little bit. But look, I think probably McDaniel got the job in part because he said, I can make this work with Tua. I think the owner wants it to work with Tua, but now we'll see. They've got all the pieces for Tua. They gave him a much better offensive line than he had last year. Connor Williams added to the mix as well. So, now it's time. It's time to prove your worth, or next year they got multiple firsts. They'll be in the quarterback market again, I would believe.
Well, so that's the thing. I kind of look at this as a win-win for the Dolphins in this situation. And the first win would be Tua thrives in this new environment, in this new system, with this new supporting cast that he has now, and they're ready to roll him out here for the future, and he becomes, the face of the franchise, without question. Or they find out for sure this year that he is not the guy, and then they're, like you said, in the quarterback market again. So it's either we have found our solution, or we know we need to find the solution. There's no middle ground after this year.
Yeah, I mean, just think about how they started last year. And look, the stories are pretty well documented now that Flores is not a believer in Tua and wanted them to move in a different direction prior to even last season. But they can't have another start like that. Tua can't have another start like that because he won't be playing. It'll be Teddy Bridgewater, and they'll have already made the decision. We're moving on in the offseason to go ahead. And obviously, because of all the chips they put in on Tyreek Hill, the draft is basically a non-starter for them if their first pick is in the 4th round, right? So you're looking at maybe you could steal a starter somewhere out of there in the latter picks, but most likely you're just looking for depth pieces, or maybe you're rolling the dice on someone who, from whatever reason, had a 2nd round grade, but now he's slid into the 4th round because of injury or off-field stuff or whatever it may be, and then maybe you hope you can salvage that. But their team is pretty much their team at this point.
Yeah, that's a good point. And look, they'd love to see some of those offensive linemen that they spent high draft
Yes.
resources on in recent years. Austin Jackson, Robert Hunt, Liam Eichenberg, that whole crew really kind of stepped forward even more so this year to, either jump into one of those best 5 starting positions or provide, real quality depth on that roster as they look to continue to support in front of Tua Tagovailoa in addition to around him. Let's move to the final team of the division, the New York Jets, year 2 of the Zach Wilson, Robert Saleh era as head coach and quarterback. What'd you see from him this offseason?
They have gotten a lot of attention from people I talk to around the league, AFC, NFC, executive scouts. There's a plan in place. People are seeing a good execution of a plan and a step forward from this team here in this offseason. I say it's a B+ offseason for them. You have LaFleur's offense, right? So what do? He needs tight ends. You didn't have any tight ends. So you go out and sign basically the 2 best guys that ended up being free agents in Conklin and Uzama, right? Now, if they can get sort of mirror the production they had last year, that's a great add. And even if that production comes down a little bit, still, they got nothing out of that position. They haven't had a good tight end since Dustin Keller. I mean, it's been that long, right? So now you've got 2 guys that have proven to be more than competent at the position. I love that. Lake and Tomlinson on the front line, maybe overpaying for a guard, but obviously they know him from the San Francisco days. And look, much like we talk about, Tua, this is a lot about Zach now, right? And his second year, we saw some signs, especially I thought later in the year, of okay, he's growing a little bit. We're seeing some things here, and now let's protect him better. They had problems at tackle. Becton gets hurt last year early, doesn't play the rest of the season. I think he maybe got 3 or 4 games in there. So if they can protect him better, they've got a good plan in place to maybe take some pressure off him, get him some safety security blankets there, and maybe now all of a sudden we'll see what Zach Wilson's all about. Because let's face it, you can have a B+ off season, and if Zach Wilson doesn't take a step forward this year, then it probably is all for naught, and they may find themselves like several other teams back in the market for a quarterback a year or 2 down the line.
Yeah, and that's something you just can't do it at this point. If you're that Jets regime with GM Joe Douglas and head coach Robert Saleh, you can't go back to ownership and be like, "Hey, sorry about that. Let's try that quarterback thing again." It's just you just don't get that many opportunities. I mean, it is rare for a GM and a coach to get a second opportunity to draft a quarterback up high. Ryan Pace and Matt Nagy did, and only lasted 1 season with the new quarterback. So you really gotta look at that as this is the guy we're riding with. How do we make it work? And I think a big part of how they will make it work as we start to look at some of the draft needs here, we'll start right there with the Jets and keep this conversation rolling, is what they do at 4 and 10. Because Mike, I see the ability there to, yes, get an edge rusher if you really want. And as long as the top 3 guys aren't gone at number 4, because then you're looking at, let's get another tackle. Why not? Continue to support Zach Wilson, maybe bounce back at 10 with a wideout. How do you see it?
Yeah, I think they're in a position where, and Joe Douglas said it, with the opportunity with 4 picks in the top 38, 5 in the top 69, they can get some impact players and really help shape their future going forward. And I look at it, you're right. I mean, you could go pass rusher, you could go offensive tackle, you could even go corner. I mean, to me, Gardner is probably the safest pick in the draft, maybe.
Yeah.
Would you do it? Is it too high at 4? Do you think you can get him at 10? I just think they're in a position where they can just look at it and say, if we get this position, we can still help ourselves at 10 as well. Or, as we've heard, and I think is clearly part of their thinking is, can we go get a number 1? Is Deebo Samuel going to get put out there? Is DK Metcalf going to be put out there? I mean, as of right now, you're getting pushed back and there's nothing going to happen and there's still time to fix this. But I don't know. They put an offer on the table that Kansas City was willing to take without the 2 first-round picks for Tyreek Hill, and Hill eventually chose the Dolphins over the Jets. But if you dangle that 10 for someone like DK or Deebo, would that be, enough to convince that side to say, all right, well, we love our player, but we're going to have to pay him $25-30 million a year. We get a 10, we can get a good wide receiver there and start the clock over on that position. That's just, I think they have a lot of options.
I would agree. Let's go back up the totem pole here with the Miami Dolphins. As you mentioned, their first pick is coming in the compensatory area of the 3rd round at number 102. So look, we're not going to identify a player here, but again, look, I think trying to find, another edge rusher there to kind of bolster that unit. I think, linebacker, I think offensive line as a possibility there, just anywhere where they can get some really good football players that are going to, either compete on special teams immediately or provide depth is what they're looking for here.
Yeah, that to me, like I said, it's almost like you're in a dice roll situation there because
Yeah.
you're not picking for so long. It's just like, what's there? Is there somebody that we like that, again, for whatever reason, has slipped down the board a little bit, or is there someone we project and maybe he's a little bit of a project, but like, hey, if we can maximize this guy, knowing that we're essentially having an opportunity to redshirt him this year, that maybe that's a guy that can impact our football team, 2 years from now, and with what they've done this offseason, I don't know that they're necessarily desperate for impact pieces right away.
Yeah. Let's move to the Bills, who have 8 picks in total, starting with number 25 overall. I skipped the Patriots. We'll get back to them here in a second. But we talked about that as maybe a spot for another wide receiver, or, if one of those guards is available as you continue to try to, kind of beef up front and get a little bit more out of that run game, could be something they could consider, Mike.
Yeah, what's interesting is you kind of keep hearing from Buffalo that maybe there might be a surprise here, and maybe running back is a place where, even though no one likes first round running backs, that maybe they look at a piece there and say, there's someone here who can help put our offense, which is already in overdrive, and maybe take us to another place. Again, looking for speed. I think, Bean has said it multiple times, like, hey, if you find, obviously kind of joking about the Tyreek Hill thing, but if you can find someone like Tyreek Hill, let me know. We'd
Right.
love to add a piece like that, but I think they would like the ability to get a home run hitter on that offensive side of the ball to, again, just sort of complement what they already have. I think the other thing you have to look at here is Tre'Davious White's coming off the ACL. I've heard he's ahead of schedule, but you still got to get on the field and start doing stuff.
Yeah.
So is he going to be ready for the start of the season? And their number 2 corner, Levi Wallace, is now with Pittsburgh. So Brandon Bean has not drafted a cornerback higher than the 5th round since he's been there. But maybe this is the year where you go in and you find that corner opposite of Tre'Davious when he gets right, and feel like, we're looking at an AFC where all the quarterbacks are at right now, all these weapons are at. You're going to need to be able to handle the pass. And it might be a perfect opportunity there. Someone like Andrew Booth, I know they've had him in for a top 30 visit. Someone like that who can slide right in right away, be your number 2 corner. And then who knows, a couple of years down the road where that player develops and what he becomes. But, I would look at that area if I was them at 25.
Yeah, and if Booth is gone, you're looking into the the Kyler Gordon from Washington neighborhood. You're looking into the Roger McCreary from Auburn neighborhood there as well at 25. Running backs wise, Kenny Walker, Breece Hall out of Iowa State. Blazed both those guys really did well in the athletic
Breece
portion.
Hall's name I've heard Breece Hall's name come up a few times in connection with Buffalo. So again, just something to kind of keep an eye on there.
And lastly, for the Patriots, picking 4 spots in front of the Bills there.
Let me get my list.
What do you got? Yeah, run it down.
All right. Left guard. Left tackle. Cornerback. Looking for a Devin McCourty replacement. 34, they're going with 35. A playmaking linebacker. Don't have enough speed at linebacker level. They were as bad against the run last year as they were the year before, and that was a concentration for them during this previous offseason. So maybe another run stuffer. And, if you want to be nice to Mac Jones, especially after what you've done to the offensive coaching staff here, maybe get him a shifty slot receiver, which is how they've really thrived in that offense for 20 years. And, give him that guy that can get open in 1.8 seconds. So if your offensive line isn't getting it done, you can get the ball out to someone you trust who can make a play.
I'm into that as well. Love those choices there. As we look at the AFC East roster reset here, assessing what these teams have done, what they will do in the upcoming 2022 NFL Draft.